Welcome back to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another amazing guest, Jenny, and we're going to put the C in it, Cohen, who's going to share another amazing life experience from trauma to healing. Welcome, Jenny. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then, as you know, City Sid is going to kick off the first question.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both for giving me this immediate, amazing honor to meet your audience. Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny C. Cohen. I call myself the Outside In Mastery Guide because I feel that everyone should have mastery of the outside of you. And we do that through dance and movement and being aware of how important your health is, into the inner workings of who you are, meaning what are the internal workings of your mind and memories and what is holding you stuck where you are now. And that mastery is the back and forth between the two. And that's what I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here with us today. We do like to start with all of our guests we start, the story at the childhood. And from your wonderful introduction, we did see that you have dealt with complex PTSD from childhood. So this part should go hand in hand with, the trajectory of the story. So tell us a little bit about your childhood, how you grew up, your home structure. What was that like?
Thank you for that question. Most of us want to have rose colored lens memories of our childhood. And I did until I started to heal through trying to keep my daughter alive. She was under some distress, and healing her, we realized that I had complex PTSD from my childhood. I'm 56 years young. Back in those days when I was born in Taiwan, I had the audacity to be born a girl. So when that happened, my birth was not recognized for at least a month. That was just a culture. People were really kind of upset that I was born a girl and not a boy. My mom had to deal with the guilt and shame of giving birth to a girl. After I was born, I do remember just always feeling lost and not quite sure why. And my purpose for being alive wasn't really made clear to me until my brother was born 18 months later. And it was made very clear to me that my only purpose in this world was to serve. And I was to be his second mother. Now, my brother's amazing and my parents are loving. That's the culture I was born in. Fast forward until I was 4, when my father came to this country, I was shipped from the tip of Taiwan, which is Taipei. Think of Taiwan as a bean shape. So the northern part where Taipei is, where my parents fell in love and got married and had me and my brother, I was shipped down to the southern part of Taiwan, which is really, really, really country. Back in those days, I went from Taipei, which was a city, to the rural part of Taiwan, dirt floors, no electricity, no plumbing. And I was left to be in charge of my brother at 4 years old. He was barely 2 during the day when my grandparents would go farming. And my job was to keep my brother alive during the day. That went on for 8 months. Then my father came back from the States and then brought my brother and I and my mother to the US. That was cool. I got to have my first sip of soda. Great memory. That was awesome. And then they put me into school, speaking no English at all, into first grade. My birthday's end of July. In Boston, the school systems, the cutoff for the birthdays is September 1st. My parents didn't keep me home for a year. They put me right into school. So I was the youngest in the class. Everyone was the first grade by September 1st. I did not turn 6 until the following July. So I was super young, super small. And the first day of school, they introduced me to a classmate, a cute, another little Asian girl who was an interpreter. Day 2, she wouldn't talk to me anymore because all the other classmates were making fun of her. So I had to struggle. I didn't speak any English. And that first week, I actually had an accident in my seat in front of everyone because I didn't know how to ask for the bathroom because no one was interpreting for me. So that's just the beginning of some of the trauma.
Oh wow, well we have a lot, and I don't know where to start, but I guess I'm gonna start back with let's go to your brother. So you said you were 18 months older than your brother,
Just about, yeah.
and when did you have to start watching him? What
There's
age were you?
a 4. When I was 4 years old, my father came to the States, and my
Okay.
mother was working in, like, the government of Taiwan. So
Uh-huh.
they were like, "There's no one to watch you," so they shipped me down south to my grandparents.
Oh wow. And then you had to watch your brother from your grandparents.
Yeah, yeah, because they would leave at sunup and come back sundown, and
So you
my
were
job was to keep my like, the whole day, they'd be gone.
4 years old
4 years old.
watching 18 month.
2-year-old. Yeah. I
How
know.
how
How did we stay alive? It was like a miracle. I don't know. I don't know. I do not know how he didn't, like, die on my watch. He was a
how did
rambunctious little kid too.
wow, how did that make you feel as a child?
Well, I don't know about you 2. If you have memories of your childhood, I have nothing. I don't remember anything from my childhood. I think it was so stressful, I didn't remember nothing. I really didn't remember anything until I started going through therapy, and there'd be some memories that would come through. One of my aunts, I had a conversation with her last time I visited my mother last year in Boston, 'cause I'm here in Utah. And out of the blue, I'm asking her, "So how do you and uncle meet each other?" And she went off on a tangent about how the only memory she had of me as a little girl was that I was crying all the time. Like, I could have been pretty, but I was crying, so I had this ugly little face with swollen eyes.
My gosh, it's terrible. Yeah, it's like our elders are just kind of uncensored sometimes. They don't care. They say what comes to mind. But now, how did you kind of get along then? How did you start learning English? What was your methods? How did the school help, if any? And what, I guess, at what point did your experience start to change with school?
That's a really good question. There was no help back then. You have to remember, I'm 56. So I started first grade 1974-ish, 75, 74. So they just threw you in. They made a little girl my interpreter. And she, God love her, she said, "No, I'm a little girl. I want to be with my friends." I think I just had to pick up English as it went. I became an avid reader. I was bullied because my parents didn't know how to set me up for success in school, right? Because they're immigrants. When you're an immigrant, when you come to this country, it's survival of the fittest. They don't care that at that time. Do you both know the original Charlie's Angels with Farrah Fawcett? Am I aging myself out? Right? Farrah Fawcett. This was like in the 70s. Like, it was all blonde white people with feathered hair and chinos and lip gloss. Right? My mom sent me to school in sandals with knee-high socks, a peasant skirt. I know. I see the look on your face. My hair was pulled back in a ponytail with giant cook glass. That's how I showed up for school. And my mom would say to me, "You better sit in the front of class. You better go to the front of the classroom and make sure the teacher knows that you're there to study." So I did that and then suffered hell from classmates for 3 years after that.
Wow. What is some of the bullying that you went through? We try to bring transparency to the audience, especially kids that are going through bullying, so that they, realize the impact of bullying. Can you give us some examples of the bullying you went through as a child?
So the context, though, to be clear, is we didn't have cell phones back then, right? So there was no internet to torture you when you were out of school, right? Because if you're in school, they could do things like not sit with you, make sure that you weren't spoken to, no one made eye contact with you when you're in school. I remember these 2 boys. Both of their names were Billies, and they were really big because they had been kept back 2 or 3 years. And they would do things like make fun of my last name. So my unmarried name, my what is it? I want to say virgin name. My Asian name
Maiden.
was right. Thank you. My maiden name. my maiden name is HSU. So the pronunciation is Shu. It's like a weird German spelling. So there's a U with that sound, and they would call me Shu, and they would be making fun of that. My parents owned a shoe company. These days, I would think that was cool. Back then, that was like the worst type of insults. And sometimes it's not even what the kids say, it's how they say it that would dig under your skin, and they would do little things like pass notes around and then go bypass you. Or if you had the unluckiness of your direct bullies being in gym class, they would like pound at you with the dodgeball or not pick you so you were last. Similar things like that. These days, though, because I'm a little more savvy and I have two kids who are college graduates now. Back in the days when cell phones were available, they could tease you on social media, because I know there were quite a bit of memes going around with my kids because they were homeschooled, and they were actually beating all the kids in the dance company they were part of, and they didn't like it.
I'm sorry, it's on me. Okay. All right. So, is there anyone, whether that was someone in the school administration or a kid, another, a fellow student, was there anyone that stood out in your mind that, was actually decent to you or nice to you or kind of assisted through that rough time, whether that was out of school as well? Was there anyone that did assist you with acclimating to being in the United States?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I love this man. His name was Mr. Pendleton. And he was this beautiful, tall black man that stood up for me one time when I almost was squashed flat by the two big bullies, the Billies. I don't know. Should I protect their identities? Either way, they were two big bullies, and they were teasing me. They had me backed into a corner. It was sixth grade, and I lost my temper and threw my books at them. And then I was like waiting for them to beat the living daylights out of them. And at that moment, Mr. Pendleton stepped out and pulled the boys into his room. And I don't know what he said to them, and they left me alone after that. And that was the first time I actually had any peace out of that new school for about 3 years.
Oh wow, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Pendleton. I want to jump back a little bit into your childhood because you said you moved from the rural to the country, from electricity and running water to no electricity and no plumbing. Can you tell us what that was like growing up?
We were there for 8 months. And so if I think most of the people listening to your amazing show right now, we know you need electricity to even listen to the interview. You probably have lights. You probably have a fridge with food in it. You have some type of plumbing. When we moved there, I still remember the horror of the chamber pot. Because if you're familiar with Shrek, the movie, how they had a Shrek outhouse, that was the only bathroom that I could use after having come from the city as a 4-year-old with running water and a natural toilet seat. So Shrek never gave us a tour. When you're in an outhouse, is basically a hole with a covering of walls on top with the slats put over the hole, and you kind of like you do your bathroom into the hole, and that's it. You can't flush anything. There's bugs in there. And at night, it was too dark. Remember, there's no electricity, no flashlights back in the day. No one could afford that type of thing. So if I had to pee in the middle of the night, they had a chamber pot they pulled out from under the bed. And I think I must have fallen into it a couple of times because I was so small to begin with that I just, even the thought of it, I had memories of just hating that thing, even though that's the only thing I remember of that experience of those 8 months. Oh, and another one. Ready? So ask any Asian person about the story about the fox. Now, they have a name for it, and I speak Mandarin. My mother speaks Hakkanese, and my father speaks Taiwanese, those dialects. And everyone from Taiwan knows about this fable they would tell children. You ready? There is a fox that likes to eat little children. It's magical, and it can assume the form of your loved ones. It just knows. And if it can trick you into opening the door, it'll eat you. And the only thing it will leave behind, and they'll know that you're been eaten, is your tiny pinky finger will be left on the floor. And the only way for you to stay safe is to realize that the fox cannot disguise his tail. So if you see someone that looks at them and they're sitting on a pot, to me, it was like the chamber pot. That's what I couldn't stop thinking about. If it's a human that is sitting on a pot, it's probably the fox waiting to eat you. And that's how they got me to behave when they weren't around.
Oh my gosh. And were you, well, no, that's a silly question because obviously you weren't prepared to go to the countryside. I was wondering if, before your parents had taken you there, you spent some time there, but you barely had lived life at that age. So it's kind of a moot question, but, how was at least was there any love involved, with grandparents? Can you remember any happy times, living with them, or the kind of the natural feeling we should get from grandparents?
Sadly, I wish I did. I think the spirit of my grandmother has visited me in the past. Unfortunately, there is a reputation Taiwanese elders have of being wife beaters. So I think I watched a lot of that when I was there for those 8 months. And that's probably part of why I don't have very many memories other than that darn chamber pot. Oh, and there was one memory time I think I must have run off by myself and left my brother. And I remember I was walking along the elevated dirt path and some man flashed me. That's the only other memory I have of those times.
Wow. You say your grandmother used to abuse your grandfather?
My grandfather would beat my grandmother.
Your grandfather would beat your grandmother.
Yeah, and he
Was
was
it
a tiny
severe
little.
abuse or?
All I know is it when I was younger in college, I once got into a fight with my husband's roommate because he was an aggressive person and he tried to like intimidate me.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, oh, really? You guys? And I would go toe to toe with him because it would inflame an old part of me. And I think during that time with my brother and I, because it was kind of known that my father's father beat my father's mother, and that's kind of the culture he grew up with, right? And so when we say beat, I'm not saying so much physical. It's like there were these twitches, that he would beat her with, and that
He
resonates.
beat her with twitches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? That culture cultures that you and I, we don't live, but we carry it in ourselves, right? That memory of it. I experienced it. I don't remember it at all. And it rings true in my body though, when I talk about the fact that he did beat her. He was a wife beater. And I remember another story when because my parents were the first non-arranged marriages back in those days. Everyone's marriages were rearranged, and my parents met in Taipei, Taiwan, and fell in love, and they were the first non-arranged marriage. And now my mother has 5 younger brothers, and they had a little conversation with my dad. We know the Taiwanese men beat their wives. You're never going to touch our sister, are you? And they had a little talk with him. And my father's never touched my mother. He does raise his voice at her, and that's the part of the culture still, but he's never touched her because my uncles would take him out.
Goodness. Now, at what point, did you start feeling like things took a turn for you for the better anyway? Once you were here in the United States, at what age, did you feel like things were starting to look up? And even still, what was your home life like, at that time, dealing with issues that probably didn't leave from coming across to a different country, in the home. So tell us a little bit about that.
when you come to this country or any type of country where you're not grown up in it, right? And if your parents are not native to that country or even aware of how hard it is for you as a kid, I had this Asian culture at home, and then I had to speak English and try and figure out what the being cool rules were. And I did not figure it out until I do think, honestly, now that we're talking about it, it was Mr. Pendleton sticking up for me. I felt, oh, I don't deserve this behavior. Like, I don't deserve to be the brunt of everyone bullying me. And in 6th grade, we had a science teacher who was sick, and a sub came, and the whole class was giving him a hard time. And I was trying to tell them stop it. He's just trying to teach us because, I was naive. I was like, fighting other people's fight. And we got in trouble with the math teacher who made us all stay in for recess. So we got detention in her office for a recess. And we're all sitting there upset that we're there for in her room instead of outside for recess. This 6th grade. And I remember standing up and walking to the front of the classroom and basically telling my entire class off and telling them, I'm here to get an education. You don't need to be my friend, but you don't need to make it hard for me to learn. And basically it was like my version of an FU to the whole class. And they were all shocked. And I think all the teachers knew about who was being bullied by who, but they never stepped in those days. And I remember Miss Brennan, that's my math teacher. Miss Brennan looking at me like, whoa. And then after that, very few people bothered me. And then I realized, I was supposed to stop the bullying myself because no one else is going to do it for me. Other than that one time, God bless Mr. Pendleton. That's it.
Um, I wanted to ask if how differently you were treated with your brother, because I know the boy is a dominant. I don't want a girl, but I want a boy. So how different was the favoritism? I guess I want to say.
I think this is going to resonate with everybody, right? When there's favorites in the house. My brother could do no wrong. There was also an issue where every time he was disciplined, he would spring a fever. So it got to the point he was rarely disciplined, and I always bore the brunt of it. So if he did something wrong, I would get the brunt of it because I was responsible for him. And over time, it became I would second guess myself or shame myself or put myself in the wrong automatically. There was a period of time as I was making friends or being in social settings, I would start every sentence with, I'm sorry or I'm sorry, but. So it's pretty interesting. If anyone listening to this, if you are starting every single sentence with, I'm sorry, because some of us do that, that is a sure sign that you want to look at why you're doing that. Because there's no reason why anyone should apologize and start every single sentence with, I'm sorry.
Definitely understand that. What were some of the, I guess once you started kind of like peeping the scene and kind of understanding the rate of things here, what struggles did you see your parents going through at that time, or that you could, kind of put together and understand? And did that, stress of whatever they had going on make it a little harder for you at home? And also, were you still, as responsible for your brother as you were, previously? Was that still, intended to be the case?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I think it wasn't really until I went off to college that I was allowed to be off on my own. It was even though, we had different cliques. My brother never had trouble making friends. And if you think over, like when we first started school, I went right into 1st grade and I think, why would I not know this? Either way, he was still home with my mom. So he got a couple of years with her. And then he never was bullied because he was at that magical age where he was making friends with people. And then when school started, he was with the same group of kids in some way because I remember a family where the sister and I were friends, and my brother was friends with the younger brother, and they were already just naturally accepted because they had kind of not gotten to that awkward grade school age where people started deciding who's popular and who's not. At least that's the way it was 50 something years ago. So now we're talking about when we were in grade school, I was still expected to watch out for him. And I do know on the down low that he actually didn't really start getting into real trouble until I went off to college. And then he was on his own in high school to the point like he had a friend lead him astray, and he ended up going to junior court for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel as though taking on the responsibility of your brother took away from you? Because we want to bring that transparency to parent, because that's 4 years old watching a 18-month-year-old is, yeah, that's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it's a miracle both of us are alive, right? I mean, you think about it, and there are cultures, I think even I dare say here, where parents have to work, right? And you think, oh, your kids are fine, they're gonna be fine, and they're not. Because the real talk about it is that there's a phrasing in the complex PTSD therapy that I've gone through, and then subsequently I've become more trauma aware, trained in all of the things that I do with my clients. There's a phrasing called parentification. Parentification is when a child is expected to be an adult. All right. So, or even an adult, the parent becomes childlike and they expect the kid to be the parent in the relationship. And we really want to be careful of that with parents because, yes, I understand about tough love. I am 56 years young. I understand about our generation, and we're like, what are you going to cry? I'll give you something to cry about, or get over it already. I understand that we want to be careful not to go too far away from children having independence. The difference, though, is if I had just been given a chance to even just learn about myself versus immediately being made responsible for my little brother, that would have made a difference. I'm not saying that it didn't happen for me. Yeah. At the same time, I still think of the things I could have done if I hadn't had to spend most of my life healing from that. So, everyone experiences traumas, big T's and little T's, right? And it has parents. I want to acknowledge too, we don't come with instructional books for how to heal our children or raise them, even, God forbid, right? However, if you're not in touch with yourself, because neither one of my parents were, I mean, they came from really poor parts of Taiwan. They just happened to have escaped up to Taipei, but they both came from really, really poor areas of Taiwan. They weren't afforded the knowledge they had to heal before they had me. So they just passed down all these fine family traditions of how children are expected to pull their weight as an adult. That's really key. I think parents want to be aware of that. And I know some of the older generations, my age, think, oh, the kids are too coddled these days. This world right now where we're living is a very different world from when we were little kids. It's a lot more dangerous. It's a lot more involved. So we as parents, we really need to be making sure that they're equipped as children to deal with life as children.
See, you next, or is it on me?
Honestly, I thought it was your turn, but I could be wrong.
Well, hey, I can look. Oh, you can go ahead. You can go ahead,
Okay.
Sid.
Now, when you ended up, or when you did go out of college, excuse me, or away to college, did you ever have, any of those I'm free faux pas? Did you have any moments where you did kind of, wild out, get off track, or were you able to keep yourself disciplined, 100% away from home?
I didn't. Here's the thing, right? I got to go away to college and be with people who were just as much fools as I was, right? So I still remember some adventures first year of college, and I would go drinking with girlfriends, and me who never drank. Never drank. I don't know some of you who know what wine coolers were. They don't have those anymore. I love wine coolers. I had no alcoholic tolerance whatsoever. So I was the cheapest date of anybody because I would get drunk off of one drink and be gone for the next 3 days afterwards. I still remember that first year. We went college hopping, and I'm really lucky that I made it home safely so I could worship the golden toilet because I had mixed gin with vodka. That's a big no-no in case you don't know that. I did not know that. I didn't even know what gin and vodka were. And then the caveat though about college, and I feel really, really strongly about this, is because I didn't know where I was, right? I didn't know about all the trauma because remember, I really like to think of my childhood with these rose-colored lenses. I didn't acknowledge the trauma I went through. I didn't know to acknowledge that I was seeking validation in my friendships, in the boyfriend that I got. Freshman year, I met an older boy. He was a senior and he was going to be pre-med. And we were dating. And he said to me, "Oh, I'm Catholic, and I don't want to lose my virginity." Blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking, I'm Christian. I don't want to lose my virginity. Of then he's offering alcohol, and then he raped me one night when we were together. And it was like, well, it was consensual. No, it wasn't, folks. Just because I was drunk didn't mean that I was saying yes, let's get it on. I was saying no, and he was so drunk, he didn't listen. And the biggest irony about that is, when the event was done, he started crying about how he was Catholic and he had sinned. So the night that I was date raped, I'm comforting my boyfriend because he had sinned as a Catholic.
Hold on. So you were assaulted, and then he made you feel bad about it.
Yeah.
What
He
did
was
you
crying.
do?
He was crying. I'm going, no, it's okay. I don't know. What was I thinking?
Now he plotted that out. Yeah, he gaslighted you. Wow. What happened after that? What the next day or when you left, like mentally with you? What was your reaction?
So I'm getting chills in my body because I'm remembering that after I comforted him, I did crew, which is this rowing, pretty crazy sport. And we would have to do practices at 5 a.m. in the morning. So I spent the whole night comforting him, and then I was late to practice. So I got in trouble with the coach. And when because remember also, I forgot about my childhood. I can't remember any of my childhood at all, other than through some stories and one or two memories, stuff that I pieced together. I forgot that I was raped for a year. I just put it on my memory and didn't think about it anymore because I'm good at that, right? And then a year later, when it came back, what I didn't know at the time was that I went into a really deep depression and was actually doing a lot of suicidal ideation. And I didn't know because I just remember that I felt really, really sad and I couldn't get out of it. I was failing a couple of classes and I didn't know anyone to talk to. I listened to my mother. She had said to me, "Oh, if you're going to date somebody, they have to be 4 years your senior because that way they can take care of you." And I was thinking, "Oh, all right." So I dated this older boy who knew, he knew how to manipulate me. That's all that I achieved in that relationship, really, honestly. So a year later, when I realized and cried uncontrollably for a great many hours, I still didn't seek therapy, which is something you need to do, folks. Like, I didn't do that because in Asian culture, therapists now they're better. The current generation is much more knowledgeable. Back then, it was not acknowledged. Um, Old school cultures, we tend to hide away anything with mental illness. So I didn't know that I should be seeking a therapist. So I just kind of cried, felt really, really depressed. Luckily, didn't act on my thoughts, and then graduated. And actually, before I graduated, I met the boy that became my husband.
Well, that was a wild ride for sure. Now, I guess after that, after that incident, after you were assaulted, I guess what was the vibe like? I'm pretty sure, you were completely thrown off? Was it just kind of we pick up and we move on like nothing happened, or how did everything kind of materialize between you two after that point?
I didn't know that he already had his ulterior plan, right? So we dated until he graduated, and he broke up for my own good. He broke up because he was going off to med school for me, really for me, and because I forgot, right? I forgot that I had my virginity taken away from me, not my choice, forcibly while we were drunk. I was sad. He broke up with me, and then I hooked up with someone else without even thinking. Does that make sense? I'm supposed to have a boyfriend. This guy was also older than me. And I didn't realize, right, that he was actually not a good person for me to be a boyfriend girlfriend with. And the irony of it is that the first boyfriend would come back to visit on campus and talk me into him staying with me and then sleeping with me, because I just would kind of disassociate and not be in my body during those times. Nowadays, when I look at my college self, I just want to, first I want to slap him and punch him, but I kind of want to shake myself and go, what were you doing? And I think it was the seeking of validation way from back in my childhood, because I thought that I was seen, but I wasn't, right? I know that. However, that age of me, that version of me, felt some validation from that little bit of horrible attention I was getting.
Can I jump back to a piece of your childhood? Were you abused as a child or just?
So I don't remember. I do have one symptom that we've resolved since. So I'm currently married 31 plus years, been with the same person 35 years. Love this man, the sweetest person in the entire world. Okay. When we first started being like together, for lack of a better word, if he's spooning me and he would try to throw a leg over me, I would get violent. I would get physically ill and want to punch him and stab him in the head because there's this violent reaction. And I think that something did happen to me in my childhood. And we have a complex PTSD specialist therapist. She specializes in complex PTSD. And when someone was going to therapy with her and they had a memory and realized that they were abused by an elder, they were like, why don't I remember it? Like, why don't I remember specific details? And then when I had a conversation with her about me, her thing was, you don't need to remember exactly what happened if it resonates in your body. And I do a modality with people where it's called muscle testing, where you ask your body questions, right? And I can demonstrate it to you right now. So if I hold my hand up like this is my non-dominant side. It might look opposite for you, but this is my left side, okay? And if I hold my elbow and my wrist and my finger straight, my palm is towards me in a fist. And I go and push on this button, this button, this knuckle, and I push down it and I resist. It's pretty firm. I can keep it pretty straight, right? And I'm going to say, my name is Jenny C. Cohen. And my finger goes, yeah, your name is Jenny C. Cohen. If I were to say, my name is Penelope Cruz. I'm Penelope Cruz, and I go and I'm holding this as strong as I can. My finger will bend because my body knows I'm not Penelope Cruz. In my mind, I could be, but my body knows I'm not. Yeah. My eyes are brown. My eye color is brown. My eyes don't want green eyes. My eye color is green. No matter how hard I hold it up, my fingers are like, no, my body's going, no, you're not, your eyes aren't green, they're brown. Mm-hmm. So if I were to ask, so we've established my yes and my no, my body has answers. Yeah. So if I were to ask, right, was I date raped by D? Was I date raped? My body goes, yeah, you were. Okay. Was I in any way sexually assaulted when I was a child in the country? Yes. So my body knows, even though my mind doesn't 100% remember the details, I know that something happened to me when I was a child.
So do you remember you don't remember at all the assault as a child?
Nope.
You don't remember who it was?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. We think, I think it was either A relative that I remember visiting. It could have been my grandfather. Don't know.
Mm.
But I know it
So,
happened, right?
hmm
And like anybody, from what I just showed them, you can get answers from your body. Now, I've
but
had people who go, but this doesn't work. I'm like, because you haven't established trust with your own body. But once you do it enough, your body will be able to tell you answers you can't figure out with your mind.
And actually, I was doing it while you were waiting, and my hand did, when I asked questions, slightly go down. So I was like, okay, I might try this while you were in the background. I was doing it, but I just wanted to back you real quick before I said something happened to me as well, and I blacked it out up until about a couple of years ago. So we say it didn't happen, but when we come to reality, I actually can. Remember bits and pieces of it now because I had nightmares from a child up until I acknowledged it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. I have permission to speak on this, all right? Because I have fraternal twins, and my daughter was that happened to her with an elder that we didn't know when she was 4, right? And until she came to that realization when she was going to therapy, she started telling the therapist about these really horrible memories she would have of killing people in her sleep. Specifically, the person that sexually assaulted her, she would have vivid dreams, and she would be so scared waking up that she would have these dreams. And it was because her subconscious was telling her something had happened with them, and she couldn't remember the details. To this day, she can't remember the details. It's not necessary to remember the details for her recovery. And I will tell you, for a while in her recovery, um, old white men would mess with her, if that makes sense. They would really kind of like go into her personal space. And since she healed, they cross the street when they see her walking towards them. Like if they're walking, people don't mess with her anymore because she's really healed herself.
Absolutely. And I did want to ask, even though your parents met under what, culturally for you all is non-traditional terms, did they, still in a sense, push you to, settle down in the traditional sense, to kind of go the wife route, before wanting a career or anything like that? Were you, pressured in a certain way by your parents, in moving forward with your life?
I experienced the opposite. My parents came from such poverty, and in Taiwan, only a small percentage of people move on to college. You have to test into the upper 1%, I think, at that time, before you were allowed to move on. So my mother never went to high school. She had 5 younger brothers. She was the 4th daughter in her family, very, very poor farmers. So they put money together for her 5 younger brothers to go to school. My mother only graduated from grade school. She put herself through high school by going to Taiwan and working, and then taking that money and putting herself through high school. My father was sent off when he was about 10 years old. Remember that that really rural country part where there were no schools. So he was sent away to the closest school where he could go to school, and he lived in a family's hallway, like literally. And he was 10 maybe, and he would be provided enough money to buy 1 meal a day. So at 10 years old, my father, sorry, no, my brother, that's a Freudian slip. My father was sent off to go to school by himself, and he would live in a family where they would grudgingly let him live there because they liked the money that my grandfather was sending them. And he had to make his own meals and go to school. And then in high school, he had to go further because it was so country where he was. And he was expected to send all his money back because they put all the investment in him to go to school to make something of himself. And even when I was born and my parents were married and my brother came, he still had to send the majority of his money back home to his parents. And that's the background, right? So when I got to be of college age, they were like, no, you're going to go to college and you're going to go and get your master's degree. And they were pissed when I stayed home to homeschool my kids. My dad was furious.
Oh wow. That's a lot. So there's a yeah. So yeah, there's a I guess when we hear um folks sending money back home, it's actually because the parents provide for you as a child, and when you get older, you have to reimburse that money pretty much.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So when we hear that, I mean, just learned something new. Um, I want to jump into a little bit because I like to talk about this piece of it is the suicidal piece of it and the thoughts. What led you to that point of feeling that way? And what are some of the signs like I can explain mine, but this is not about me. This is about you bringing awareness to the audience. Like, what made you get to that place of feeling suicidal?
Okay, so we all think of the extremes, right? Like Robin Williams and other people who overdose. And the thing is if we have lifetimes, and for some younger people who take their lives, it's some type of magnified experiences where your will to live gets somehow affected, right? And so for me, the final straw in college when I started to have those feelings was the violation of this person that I thought was my boyfriend who cared about me, right? And it really wasn't. He satisfied himself in the moment, even though he knew what my needs were, right? Before that, though, if we trace back to my always having difficulty making friends because I grew up biculturally and my parents would want me to speak proper English, but couldn't do it themselves. Still wanted me to speak Mandarin at home. I grew up having no idea why everyone got to have the tooth fairy, Santa Claus. I never had any of that. And I learned very early that that was just make believe because, I would hang up my stockings and nothing would come every year, but everybody would come to school talking about the things that were in their stockings. I never had that. And then prior to that, coming to the States and having a culture shock and thinking I could find a friend and someone that looked like me, and her going, no, no, no. I don't care that we look alike and I can speak your language. I want nothing to do with this. I finally found friends. They finally accepted me. Bye bye. See you later. That type of thing. And then even before that, to trace back to when I, as a child, felt abandoned by my parents, right? And I still had to care for my brother. And who knows what little I remember if I were to magnify the reality of what had happened with my grandparents. And then before that, when my birth wasn't recognized, I think my parents did the best they could. I know that now as an adult at 56. Back then, that part of me did not realize that people weren't equipped to be parents. And I had to learn that life lesson. That was part of my life lesson that I had to learn, correct? However, in the interim, I didn't know. So it chipped away at this will to live. And then I would have thoughts of, no one's going to miss me if I'm gone. Oh, it doesn't matter what I have to say. I'm not even going to try. Those are telling you something if you're having those thoughts. Okay? Because there's a work that I do where we talk about um, if everyone comes, like some people know what tapping is, but if you come to this part in your chest where it's between the notch in your collarbone and the bottom of your sternum and the middle part, if people have breasts, it's like right where your nipples go across. This is considered some integral parts of glands, and you come between this middle part, so it's like 3/4 of the way up on your sternum, and that's your thymus gland. And this thymus gland houses your will to live, and this will to live can get hampered by something as simple and tiny as a thought of, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm around or not. Just that one thought can harm the energy housed here that is the same as your will to live. Now imagine what happened with all those things that happened in my life that chipped away at my will to live. How did I last that long is my question, right? What I want to ask the audience, like, think about all the things that you remember, and then probably a bunch of other things you don't remember. And how is that affecting your will to live? And if you ever have times when you wonder, like, how quickly you could snuff yourself out, that's a sign, okay? And you need to really, like, be like, oh, I need to talk to somebody. Does that make sense? We're no longer in this age where you need to tough it out. Please don't do that. You don't need to tough it out. You need to reach out.
I agree. I certainly agree. Now, at what point, or what, if there was a significant moment that you can remember, where you felt like enough was enough and you were ready to take that healing journey, to kind of correct all of the wrong done? When was that kind of pivotal moment for you to know that you wanted to do things a little bit differently, or, hash out the stuff from your past?
It wasn't motivated by me, though. It was after my breast cancer treatment was done. And I've always used dance as a way to connect with the divine. It was one of the few ways I felt I could pray. And I had done belly dancing, not ballet, belly dancing before and during my treatment. And I went back to it. And when you're going through any type of traumatic event, you tend to disassociate. And I've said that a couple of times. So I'm really good at it. Most of us are, to avoid the realities of how much something hurts. If you're listening going, but I've never gone through anything traumatic, I want to remind you, we're all survivors of the pandemic, right? COVID lockdown, all that, we all lived through it. Everybody now has to acquiesce that you've gone through something traumatic. Okay. All right. So we're on that level playing ground. For me, during my cancer treatment, I had to disassociate every time I had to get pumped full of chemotherapy. That's poison they're injecting into your body, and you have to sit still. So there's a freeze response to that traumatic event. I would escape by going to do my dance stuff. And then when my treatment was done, I couldn't deal with the fact that my body felt completely different. So I was still escaping my dance stuff. I missed the signs of one of my kids going into really extreme distress. And it wasn't until they pulled me aside and said to me, I want to show you the scars. They were really bad grooves in their body. And the fact that they didn't want to be around much longer. And I realized, oh, I'm going to lose this child, this precious. I had to go through in vitro fertilization. I couldn't have a baby naturally. So I was like, this miracle from God that was given to me, I'm about to lose this baby. So I had to get present for keeping this child alive. And that's when I had that kind of come to Jesus moment, because if I'm not, like, right now I'm here talking to you and I know if my child is safe. Before, no clue. I was just floating in and around trying to get through the days, right? And I know I'm healed now because a year ago, July 30th, which is the day, it's an anniversary date of me starting chemotherapy. And that day last year, we're in 2024 right now, in 23, which was 8 years after my cancer treatment had begun and started and then ended. I was seeing clients that day. I saw wonderful clients. I had a wonderful day. I sat down to journal. My husband said something. He did something stupid. Like, I love my husband. He did something stupid. And I got so enraged. Like, I was so. And then I started berating myself. And then I started bawling and crying. And my chest felt like both things. One, it felt like my heart was going to explode. At the same time, it felt like something was squishing it. I thought I was having a heart attack. I cried bitterly and made plans to kill myself for about 30 minutes. And then I realized it's July 30th. And I went, what? It's July 30th. What? Oh, I started chemo. I started chemotherapy that day. I caught my breath, stopped crying immediately. The pain around my heart stopped immediately. My body was asking me to please acknowledge that 8 years before I was going through chemo. Right? This year for July 30th, guess what I did? I took the day off. I didn't see any clients. I went to a hot spring. I soaked in the hot, like salt water. I give gratitude. I gave myself a massage the Friday before. I was like, thank you, body, for taking care of me. You did so good. We don't do enough of this, everyone. Really, truly, you have to. I have an energy healer who says to me, you need to stop living in the past. I'm not reliving my chemo. I'm acknowledging how pissed my body is at me for putting it through chemo, even though I'm alive and I'm happy to be alive. I have chemo brain and severe nerve damage in my hands and feet from the chemo, though. Right? And so we got to acknowledge, you guys, okay, can I go off topic about one thing about the chemo that no one talks about, but we're talking about this as Unfiltered. Can I talk about it?
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead. We have a few more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up once you
Okay.
finish. Yeah, so go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually very traumatic, and I really want to talk about it because it's an unfiltered thing and I can talk about it, right? So chemotherapy throws women into early menopause. Okay, most women, because this is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. If you're younger before childbearing age and you undergo chemotherapy, it can stop your ability to have children, and that's really important. If you've never been told that, I already had kids when I started chemotherapy, so I went into early menopause. And people don't tell you that when you go into menopause and your body starts to go into the non-bearing state, that means everything down there below your belly button, the hoo-ha area, starts to go dormant. And you can have something that's called vaginismus, where that part of you, like your vaginal canal, starts to shorten. And that makes you prone to urinary tract infections. It can affect your health, everything. No one talks about that. Okay, I'm done.
Oh wow. I'm glad you said it because that's a fact that I just learned today. What about you, Sid? Because I would have never known that.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't know that.
Yeah. So thank you. We appreciate that, and that's what we want is transparency for people to hear to know. Because imagine how much trauma that is on a body, especially
Yeah.
for folks that go through it young and then have chemo, and then they can't figure out why they can't have kids. So
Yeah.
definitely. So we're at time. We like to close off two things. Can you tell us a little bit? Can you give us advice on? You've been through a lot, and I call what you went through blackout trauma, where we black it out. We don't want to remember. We don't want to know it. In some sense, we forget it. But as we get older, it just creeps back on us, and it's crazy how we'll remember stuff as we get older from our childhood, and as a child, we'll forget it and try to move on as it didn't happen. Can you give the audience advice just on some ways to heal? From some of the traumas that you went through, and then Sid is gonna give her final say, and then I'm gonna close it out.
Thank you for the opportunity to offer some of the life lessons I've had. If you go back into this episode recording and do the muscle testing to ask yourself yes, no questions to figure out kind of like what kind of trauma you had, is this something that you need to address? For me, what's really helped with me is to get present. Because I've disassociated most of my life, it's very hard for me to be present in the moment. There are so many life experiences I don't remember. Some of that is the chemo damage, but most of it is because I wasn't present. Get present. Tune into your five senses while you're doing breath work. Smell, taste, hearing, feeling of your body, being able to see something at the same time and also see the side of what you're focusing on. All of that shuts down your trauma response and gets you present. Play as much as you can. Play, not you facilitating the play. You play as much as you can. And lastly, laugh. Laugh as much as you can. Find free YouTube videos. I never had play. I definitely didn't laugh enough as a child, and I definitely wasn't present. So if you do those 3 things, those are the great ways to start getting back to yourself.
Absolutely. Very wise words to live by. Now, as we do with everyone, we do like to give you a chance to sell yourself and everything that you do to help everyone that may be going through the same things that you experience. So we do call this shameless plug. We have all of your information listed here. Please let our viewers know how they can contact you, how they can utilize your services. If there's anything you want to draw traffic or attention to, anything you have for sale, you have the floor.
Oh, this is so sweet of you guys. Okay. October 2024 is the filming of this actual episode. If you go to my website on jennycohen.com or find me on any social media, you can get in touch with me so that you can enroll in the Sweet Life Retreat Summit. It's happening October 28th, 29th, and 30th. It is a retreat on how to get the sweet life that you've always wanted and deserve. You can also, the special gift for you guys, if you go to movetobloom.com, you will get access to recordings of stretching, somatic movement, meditation. You get access to the entire library of about 20 classes for free.
Thank you so much for that. That was good. Good resources for our viewers. So we do appreciate that. And we can go ahead and close it out.
Sure. We want to thank you for tuning into Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. We want to thank you, Jenny, and put the C. Cohen. C is important because there's a lot of Jennys out there. So tell them again, add that C. Add the C. Sid, we're going to keep sharing these life experiences, right?
Right.
I just wanted to give a shout out real quick before we end because October 10th made 2 years with Sid and I missed it last time. So I definitely want to give that shout out. Thank you, Sid. That is, I don't think we've ever argued. I don't think we ever any small thing we worked out. Like there has just we've just had a very smooth friendship, sisterhood, bond, and it's just a blessing. So I just want to shout that out. Is everyone may think that people are out to get them or hurt them or take advantage of them. But this journey and people believing in the work that you do, Sid definitely is an example of how the good fight has made a bond in a relationship just from me vetting to her when she sold life insurance. So I mean, it's just it's a blessing, and people don't know, but that is how Sid and I met, and we have been rocking ever since then. And I love her to pieces. And thank you for being a part of what Unfiltered, Unspoken has become and the future of where it is going. So I just want to say thank you. I want to give you your flowers, and I love you. So, yep, we're 2 years in. So,
thank you, and happy anniversary to the good fight, y'all. Thank you for rocking with us this whole time. We appreciate it, your support, and let's keep watching these podcasts. Get us up there, so we can spread these life experiences on a grander level.
Yes. So please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channels or anything that we have going on. And if you would like, and I'm going to say this, I don't say much, but we're doing so much in the communities. We just got recognized on 96.3 by Wathea Cox. I love you. That was a testimony. I broke down. But if you can support, please support our 501c3. We're giving back to the communities. Check out our website, www.thegoodfight. There's an E on thegoodfight.org. We just changed our website. If you put .com in, it's going to redirect you to .org. So just please come out and support our mission. Unfiltered Unspoken podcast is an extension of the Good Fight so that we can share. So if someone is going through something, they have a form, a resource, an outlet for someone to help them through their life traumas. We're not a therapist, psychologist, counselor. We're not none of that. We're just a platform of resources of folks that have went through actual life experiences, and we're hoping that someone will connect so that they can start the journey to healing. That is our purpose. And we just want to say God bless, and you have a wonderful, wonderful evening.